Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the Josh Gerben Show. Today, we're talking to Mike Kennedy. He is a U.S. lawyer who happens to be Canadian, living in Canada, helping clients in Canada deal with cross-border issues in the United States. He started his own practice back in 2012, has grown it to an associate and several assistants. And we talk about the arc of starting a law firm from zero, having no clients whatsoever, to building a practice where there's a constant flow of work. I hope you enjoyed the show today.
Welcome to the Josh Gerben Show, because law school didn't teach business.
Well, Michael, welcome to the show today. Thank you so much for joining us.
Josh, thanks for having me on. I'm pretty excited.
Yeah, no, great conversation. You and I have, full disclosure, worked a little bit together in the past and know each other a little bit, but not a ton. So I think it's going to be an interesting conversation to get to know a little bit about your practice. I know you started Ingenuity Counsel back in 2012.
Yeah.
If you can just give us a quick summary of sort of what led to that point. Like, what were you doing before you started your own firm?
Yeah, good question. So the 10 years prior, after I graduated law school and grad school, I practiced in California for a couple of years. I practiced in Michigan for a couple of years, moved to Miami, worked there for a couple of years, and always working for somebody else. And I decided that, I was done with that and I wanted to work for myself and build something on my own. And so I moved back home to Canada, cross-border town of Windsor, Ontario. And started. I thought, I developed this niche practice of helping Canadians do business in the U.S. At first, I didn't know where it was going to go, and I just kind of, went where the market took me. Different questions I got from various Canadians, and I worked for law firms and for my first 6 years, and then the last almost 4 was with private company down in Miami.
Gotcha. And just to set it up a little bit more, so tell us about the practice that you started, because you alluded to it there, but you're mainly working with Canadians that need to then get into the United States and do business here. Explain a little bit how that works.
Yeah, well, I thought that I wanted to move back to Canada, live in Canada. I didn't want to commute to Detroit, even though it's not very long. I mean, it probably will only take a half an hour. It's pretty short. But I thought, I think there's a market in Canada for U.S. legal services. And I didn't know exactly what that would be, but I knew there was. I knew there's a lot of, obviously, it's a busy border crossing. So there had to be, issues. And so it was, so I started with some estate planning and some cross-border tax consulting I was doing. That's kind of how I got into it. So helping U.S. citizens living in Canada at the time. So back in 2012, the IRS was going after expats, ex-U.S., or U.S. citizens living abroad, right, for failing to file tax returns. So there were programs there, and I just learned about it. I've been a tax attorney, thought that would be a good in. And so I got to know a lot of accountants in Canada, advising them and their clients on the programs to come clean with the IRS. And that's kind of how I got started. And from there, turned into other things. It helping clients, that own, say Michigan cottages, do their Michigan estate planning, whether it's estate tax planning for the high net worth people or just the probate planning, wills and power of attorneys for the 99% of people. And then again, from there, it got into more on the business side. I was doing mostly corporate work when I was, a young lawyer in California and Michigan. So I started helping Canadian businesses expand operations into the U.S. and setting up companies throughout the U.S. and just advising them on the corporate laws. Sorry, I was just going to say, then it dovetailed into helping Canadian entrepreneurs and investors, just start from scratch in the U.S. And then got into doing certain visas too. So doing the corporate structuring, corporate law, and helping with certain business visas.
I think that's fascinating. And I'm always interested of the arc of someone that starts their own practice, because your story sounds a little bit like mine in the sense that I thought, I'm going to do one thing. And then the next thing you know, you end up sort of expanding or doing other things than you initially even thought you were going to do when you started. So it sounds like, and for anybody that's out there thinking about starting a practice, and you don't have any clients. Did you bring any clients with you when you started your own firm? It sounded like you're coming from a company, so maybe you were starting from just sort of ground zero.
Zero. I had nothing. I had zero.
Right.
I just actually the vision I had initially, even helping on the tax side of things with that wasn't what I initially actually started. I thought my vision was I'm going to be Canadian business owners that were doing business in the U.S. I thought I'm going to be their outside general counsel. That's what I want. I thought, I'm going to have this, offer this service. It's going to be like, a monthly thing, retainer. And I would, that was what I had in mind, but I let them, let the market dictate it. That really wasn't there, but that's, I thought I had an idea, and then I just, again, wherever the market took me, questions. So you never know where you're going to end up. Like you say, you start doing one thing, and naturally it's going to evolve, and if you don't evolve, you're not going to succeed.
Yeah, no, there's no question. So those first few clients, I always love these stories. Were you marketing or advertising, or were you just talking to people and telling them what you were available for? Or how did you end up just getting the first few clients in the door?
The first were just meeting people locally. It was meeting a couple of local lawyers and in particular a local accountant that was doing a lot of U.S. Canada tax work, and that's really how it started. Was I guess from the accountant introduced me to some of his clients that had these unique cross-border issues, and then I started writing right at the beginning. I wrote a couple of blogs, a couple of articles, really little. Now I realize you got to shorten those to make them blog. They were pretty long articles, but it was about basically the streamlined tax filing program, that the IRS was offering to U.S. citizens abroad, and kept writing short blogs, and I got clients. One of my longest tenured client is a client out of Toronto area. It's 4 hours away. They just were struggling to find a U.S. counsel to help them, and they just were kind of Googling. They came across some of my blogs.
I'm always amazed by the power of Google even to this day, because I certainly started my firm on the back of Google AdWords and ultimately an SEO, a strong SEO campaign. Were you being intentional about SEO, or were you, in the sense that you were hiring somebody to help you with it, or were you just like, what, I have this website, I'm going to post blogs, and then it naturally just sort of started showing up in the search engines?
Yeah, no, it was just posting them on my website, the blog site. Just I did maybe a couple years in this practice. I had I did do the Google AdWords. I was skeptical, to be honest, and it's because it's unique. I mean, sure. I don't offer I don't offer this specific service that people are going to go search for. I've learned, and I learned pretty early on, thankfully, that people are going to, for how I can help, they're searching for a problem. They have this problem. Haven't filed, U.S. tax returns, doing business in the U.S. So Google AdWords never worked for me. And I was burning through a budget pretty quickly, and after 6 months, I was like, hey, that's done. and then I realized it was, the blog was just working, just keep posting these different articles, very short, but they come up in Google searches. That people are searching for a problem rather than a person or a service. So,
and I think that's amazing. I mean, you can certainly light a lot of money on fire using Google AdWords. I've done it. It's not fun. It doesn't feel great.
Yeah.
And that's why we definitely invested in the SEO side of things, because I felt that was something that, hey, we're building real value here. You're hopefully building content that has value and will have staying power, and you're not having to pay for every random person that shows up. But when you do get people that are really looking for help, they will reach out. And I love your story even more now, because what you're describing is an ultra niche practice, law practice, that you don't have a lot of competition on these keywords that people are probably Googling, right? It wasn't like there's a ton of Canadian lawyers sitting there providing because right now, if you Google trademark attorney, I guarantee, you're going to have thousands of results, right? I mean, everybody's poured into certain spaces because they're convenient or what have you. But there's still this opportunity if you're creating content that's for a very niche audience. That's fantastic, and I'm sure it doesn't help that you're Canadian and living in Canada, because I would imagine that folks up there are more trusting of a Canadian lawyer or someone that's at least a Canadian citizen as well than calling down here for help, so to speak.
Yeah, I always like to say that. I speak Canadian, right. I do. Like, it's like, I just know, being Canadian, but I spend, big part of my adult life in the U.S., education in the U.S. and working, and obviously being a U.S. lawyer, but I just understand Canadians and Canada. And then I got to learn, some of the Canadian tax consequences that just kind of go hand in hand. So just so I understand it, and that, I feel that sets me apart from, a corporate lawyer in Detroit, say, or an estate planner in Detroit, right? Wherever that they're, and I have consequences, but they're going to do things the way they're done in America for Americans, right? It's typical. That makes sense. That's their, it's different when you're dealing with, I think, any non-resident, right? Any non-U.S., but definitely Canadians. So, and I feel like they do feel more comfortable me being Canadian and being in Canada. I mean, what can I say?
No, I mean, it is. I totally understand it. And sometimes that is what it is. If people relate to their lawyer, it makes it that much easier to hire them and to ultimately, I think, stay with you for a long period of time.
Yeah.
So we sort of have the idea of how you got this business off the ground, which is just very interesting. And at that time, I'm always curious about this too, because I think there's a parallel of where you are professionally and what you might have going on at home. That's a big career change, sort of. What was it, 10 years into your career? So personally, what did you think about the finances of all of that, sort of leaving a guaranteed salary and coming out and sort of, I mean, it is kind of what you make of it, so to speak, I guess, at that point.
So I guess I'm not, change was always a big part of my life, I guess. After leaving high school, at least, I moved around, university, then went to law school, and, in Massachusetts. I went to grad school in DC. I moved to California to start practicing, Michigan, right? Miami. So the moving around, the change, I think I thrive on it, maybe. Although I've been very settled since 2012, very settled, But early on,
getting
when I was
older
younger,
does that.
I enjoyed the change, I guess, and the challenge of something new. And yeah, I mean, it probably wasn't an ideal time in my life personally to start, but I just knew that's what I wanted to do. And I thought, when I was doing it, my son was a year and a half old at the time, and maybe almost 2 years, I guess.
Wow.
And
right,
and going through a divorce and all that, But it was, I don't know. I knew that long term that was going to be the best thing, and it turned out to be the best thing. Everything in life worked out.
That's amazing, and I think that one of the things that when I talk to a lot of other lawyers that are thinking about going out on their own, it's always like, well, the time's not quite right. For example, I have a 1-year-old. I can barely keep my head above water as it is. How am I going to start a law firm? How am I going to start any kind of professional services practice? And I think the thing I always say is, well, the timing's never probably going to be right. So you either have to decide to do it or not. But I having kids myself, I always say that I'm personally glad I started a practice before I had kids, because I'm not sure I would have done it. I mean, I think it takes a lot to say, hey, I've got all this going on and I'm going to stop, this sort of steady job that I've got and start something on my own. That's a very difficult thing to do. And a lot of people are deterred from doing it for those reasons. So I appreciate you sharing that. Yeah.
Well, one thing too about starting it was, I knew, I said I didn't want to work for anybody, and that's true. I was tired of that. Law firms, so much politics, and so but at the same time too, I know how much I worked, in a law firm for somebody else, and I figured if I'm going to work hard, do it for myself, and I get to control my schedule a bit more, and it has been great. My son's 14 now, and I don't think I've missed anything. So I look back on it all, very happily. Yeah,
that's great. And I can't agree with that more, in the sense that a lot of folks I know in law firms, they're not able to leave and jump out. Like, for example, tonight we're talking here, it's about 3:00 on the East Coast. I have a 5:30 start time for my son, 8-year-old's baseball game. And I'll be there no problem, because I'm not stuck in an office. I don't have people asking me to do stuff before the day's over. And that is something that is, you cannot replace that when you're working for yourself, right? I mean, that there is nothing like the ability to say, well, I'm going to this and no one's going to tell me I'm not, and that's, that is a freedom that you really understand when you have kids, I think, too.
Oh, 100%. I mean, and then I don't mind working. Yeah, I coach baseball as well. It's my son. And it's like, I don't mind working a Saturday afternoon if nothing's going on, because it's for myself. And because I knew, right. I'm ducking out on Tuesdays and Thursdays early to go coach baseball. We just, you're right. At law firms, you're like, it's like FaceTime and someone might give you something. And, I didn't want to deal with that. So.
I don't blame you. And I think that's why I always give the number one reason of getting out of that culture is that it's surprising. You can actually practice law in a way that doesn't require you to miss stuff that's, that quite frankly isn't overly stressful as it might be in a larger firm, especially if you can thrive on the idea that, you're able to actually bring in some work for yourself. Yeah. Which is itself sometimes a stressful issue.
Oh yeah. 100%. Yeah. I mean, It was, especially early on. I mean, that was, and so I started working out of my house, like very beginning, first year, I remember just working out of my, I thought, oh, this will be great. I have a nice home office, it wasn't, it was a learning experience, I guess, but then moving out and I started subleasing an office from my accountant friend who I met early on when I moved back here, and we do to this day do a ton of work together, so I subleased a little office from, that kind of, it was a natural crossover, between us that, hey, they have these issues pop up and, hey, send them to Mike, that's a, IRS issue, or some other random U.S. legal issue that I could help them with. So that helped. That was about a year and a half worth of my time before I got my own office.
That makes a lot of sense. And I always struggled with, I subleased it first too, and went to ultimately having my own office, and then COVID hit and our lease was up and I never renewed it. And now I'm back to working in my home office. And so I don't know, it is what it is. But yeah, I think that having those professional connections and actually having a place to go, I even in this post-COVID world, I do sort of yearn. That's one thing I definitely yearn for. I'm curious how you got, so we talked about how you sort of got started in some of these blogs and an accountant friend that still is providing you work to this day. Mm-hmm. How did you grow from there? Like what beyond, once you get to this certain point, okay, you're writing blogs, you've got some work coming in the door. What is the progression from there to getting what sounds like almost more, I don't know if this is the right word, but more sophisticated or larger clients at a certain point?
Yeah.
How did that start to happen for you?
Well, the progression was, it was, I guess, at first is like, I think I need an assistant, right? Someone to help out with some of the admin tasks, and yeah, that was a big first decision, and my very first one, I was still subleasing an office, and I remember I brought in this assistant and that worked. It was a short period of time, but it was like my first foray into having an employee, frankly, I thought when I first started this, like, oh, it's just going to be me forever, and some of my very good, friends from law school, and we're like, you feel like, oh, you're going to have associates before you know it. I'm like, no, it's just going to be me, just want this. But yeah, you can't, I realize that you get to a certain point, you can't be bogged down with, admin tasks, right? So yeah, get an assistant. And then I had assistants for, I guess, a few years, went through a couple different ones, found a pretty good one for a couple of years. And then she went on to law school herself and, and about, what are we? I guess 5 years into it, I met this law student, a local guy, and he was getting a dual degree in U.S. and Canada. And we wanted to do U.S. legal work, and so I brought him in and summered for me as a summer associate, and 5 years later, he's my full-time associate. We've been together for a couple of years. But it just grew. It's just like, get a little bit more business, right? Oh, can I afford to bring somebody else on? And then it got to the point, can I afford not to bring him on? you know.
Right. Right.
But it's stressful.
Right.
I mean, it's stressful, you know. And I was just gonna say, now I just like yesterday I hired my 1, 2, 3, 4, I guess my fourth staff member. You know,
Okay.
I have 2.5 assistants, and and then the one associate, and yeah, I mean, just kind of grow every little by little every year. And it's like, okay, well, now I think bring someone. Now I realize, okay, you have a little bit of work for somebody, but you can grow it, right? You got the history. I'm sure you see that. You're like, okay, now I think I can grow this if I have more time to grow it. This aspect of the business. So, yeah.
Hey everyone, I hope you're enjoying today's episode of The Josh Gerben Show. This show is brought to you by none other than Gerben IP. Gerben IP is a trademark, copyright, and patent firm based out of Washington, D.C. We've been in business for more than 16 years and work with clients from all over the United States and the world. If you are a U.S.-based attorney, please know that we do accept referrals from attorneys and pay a 20% referral fee for the lifetime of a client that you refer to us. We work really well with firms that don't do IP work, but need to plug in someone that does for their clients, especially someone that's not going to do the other work that you're already doing. So if you need somebody to refer your IP work to, please feel free to reach out to me. My email address is jgerben@gerbenlawfirm.com. Drop me a note. I'll be happy to schedule an appointment with you, talk about our referral program, talk about what we can do for your clients. Thanks again so much for listening. Now back to the show. It's amazing how that works. It took me, like yourself, I had one employee for a long time. It happened to be my brother. My brother needed a job. And so he was my natural paralegal, and still is to this day. And then it was a question of when do you hire that first attorney? And man, did I struggle with that because it was always like, well, I'm going to have to pay, U.S. standards. I figured I was going to have to pay $120,000 for somebody that was, at least a year or two out of law school, might have know a few things. And I was like, can I afford to make 120 grand less than I'm making right now? And the answer for a lot of the years was no.
Yes.
Because I just thought I'd have to be ready to pay that out of pocket. Right. Yeah. And then finally I hired him, and, it was amazing. Something amazing happened. I would say in that year the first year I had him, instead of actually making less by his salary, I made more. And I was like, then the light bulb went off. I said, oh, if somebody's here and we're getting more work done, or we're getting work done and I'm freed up and I'm doing more business development, now we've got something. And slowly but surely, like you said, it sort of started adding people, one, maybe two people a year, depending on the year. And of course, like you say, some people will leave, so you're replacing. Yeah. You get to a place where you say, okay, every time I add somebody, are we making more money or not? And if the answer is we're making more money, then you're probably heading in the right direction. I mean, it's not all linear, but it's amazing how that does seem to work. And the minute I think a lot of lawyers, and I know myself included, think that, or probably somewhat truthfully think that nobody's going to do the work quite as good as I'm going to. Yes. And then the question is, well, do they have to do it as good as you, or do they have to do it 80% as good as you, and it's still going to be just fine? Yeah. And or can you train them to do it to a point where you really feel comfortable they can do it where you need it to be? And so that's always a struggle, but I think that as a small law firm, if you can hire a few people and have enough work to go around to keep everybody busy, it makes your life easier. And ultimately, I think you find you just make more money. I mean, it is kind of what it is there. Yeah.
Yeah, you're right about that. It's about the hiring. I thought the same thing is like, oh my gosh, I can't afford this. I can't afford to share what I'm earning with, that's right. I thought the same thing. I'm like, oh my gosh. And I got, and I kind of felt that way for a couple of years because he was part-time. Okay. He's a very young attorney out of school, but, and I was sharing him with another local attorney because he was dual licensed, right? So I was like, oh, well, that's going to hedge my risk, I thought. And then a year ago, actually, last May, I got the building I'm currently in. We moved here, and I brought him on full time and had a banner year. Like, we're working hard, but it's just great. Like I'm like, wow, that actually worked, like, and you're right about that. It's like, initially it's like, oh my gosh, is somebody going to do as good as work as I'm going to do? Like, I know what I turn out and how I treat my clients and how I correspond with them, all these things. Right. But I've come to, it's taken me a while, but to realize now it's like, you're right. They can do like 80, 90%. That's pretty good. That's really, and so, but yeah, there's a lot of that. It's like, I don't know. I want to like micromanage still. And it's like every week I'm like letting go a little bit. I'm still learning.
Oh, I'm still learning too.
Yeah.
It's a total learning process. And the funny part is if you look at any other industry, or you look at a lot of other industries, I should say, is that part of the process is the CEO can't be everything, right? By no stretch. And as lawyers, we try to be everything when we're in small practice. We're everything from the intake person to the to the client service person. I still answer questions I shouldn't answer. Like, Josh, what's the status of my trademark? Well, I have paralegals that can answer that question just fine. Right? But it's like they're asking me, and I feel a personal obligation to respond. I feel like so you still work on that stuff all the time, I think, and we work on trying to have systems and processes to answer certain questions that you can keep off of your plate, so you could focus on the bigger things. And the more I found that I can do that, it kind of unlocks, like now I can take the time to do this because I'm not bogged down answering. In the trademark world, we get a ton of questions from clients that are at a stage where they have to prove they're using the trademark to get it registered. And everybody has a different definition of what that might mean, right? Some people think because I own a domain, I have so you always have to kind of answer a lot of questions. You have to coach clients a lot, and that's time consuming. And I used to spend 2-3 hours a day on those kind of questions, and now I spend 0 because I have associates that can answer those questions just as good as I can. And so it was a big unlock, and it was something that to this day I'm still working on every day. How do I get more of these things to people that aren't me so that I can really focus on the business and working on the business and growing it, because that's really what it is, But I feel, I'm sure you feel the same way. It's like I have clients, and even if I'm working with you, like I have the relationship with you. Like I'm trying to have that conversation, keep that relationship alive. And if I give it to somebody else, now I'm really trusting that they're going to take that relationship and handle it with the care and diligence that I would. And that's a really tough one.
Yeah, that's probably the biggest thing I struggle with too, is dealing with the clients. I know how I treat them, and they come to expect that level of service, and that's the tough. It's easier to like, the legal side. You know what? Okay, here, take care of this file. Do these documents.
Sure.
That I can. But it's dealing with clients. I think that's the most important thing I think we have, right? Is our relationship with our clients. And I value that a lot. I have great relationship with my clients, and over the years, it's so.
Oh, I feel the same way. I mean, it's our lifeblood is the relationships, but it's also what gives you the professional meaning that, these folks are trusting you, and you have this obligation to take that trust and get the job done for them. And I think that's a very hard thing to say, I'm going to delegate that. Right. And so you have to be careful with it. And that's what leads to a lot of lawyers not growing their law firms very large for those reasons.
Right. I think they don't, like we talked about just now, they don't bring people in, right? They don't hire people. They think that, I got to do this all myself. And you're never going to grow that way.
No, you're not. And I could tell you, I mean, I will sit here and able to say, my law partner, his name's Eric Perot, and he was the associate I hired in 2014 that I was talking about. And he's now a partner here because I was like, you cannot go anywhere else. Like he is, and he handles people like I handle people. And you could find that, there's people out there that can help you. And sometimes you do have to, the old saying is, you sometimes have to kiss a few frogs. Like you're not going to make every hiring decision perfectly, and you have to be prepared for that, I think. But when you do find good people, I just hold on for dear life because I know how valuable they are to an organization.
Very valuable. Yes, good people. That's all that matters. Yeah.
So as you're getting we're 12 years into your own practice right now. What's the next thing you're looking at? Like, how do you look at the next couple of years now that you're where you're at? I'm assuming that you have a pretty steady. Let me ask you this question: have you reached the point in your practice where the workflow is pretty steady, or do you still feel like the ebbs and flows of like feast or famine when it comes to the work that's coming in the door?
Well, knock on wood. I feel like it's nice and steady. Not steady. It's kind of it's constant, and I say definitely the past year, I really noticed it. maybe a little bit before that too. I mean, coming out of COVID, like, even in 2021, I think that's where it kind of really started. But this past year, more so, I've noticed it's the client referrals, right? It's the referrals from clients. I get a lot of that now, as you build up the client, your client roster. And so a lot of that. And yeah, so I mean, it's I'm not going to lie, it's been good. So, which is
That's great.
All that means is it takes away the stress, right? It's
Yes.
like I got payroll every week to meet, and rent and all these, as all this overhead. And so it's nice that I'm like, finally, okay, I can breathe a bit now.
Oh, I 100% feel you. I think in the first 10 years of my practice, there was every 2 weeks I would tell my wife, oh my God, I don't know where the next dollar is coming from. Where's the next client? Where's the next project?
Yeah.
And now, we're very close. I mean, I'm, what am I, 16 years. So, I've been a little bit longer, but at the same time, it's like right around that 12-year, 13-year mark is when it just became a constant. And like you said, I think there's not a day that goes by where I'm not getting an email like, oh, so-and-so gave me your name and I need help with this. And that type of, I always try to explain to people, the relationships will compound over the years if you treat people right. And you literally have to have a decade worth of patience with it. And a lot of people will not have that long a period of time. But if you can stay in practice for yourself for this long, that's your experience. It's interesting to hear you're having a similar experience that I'm having, which is that it just becomes a lot more constant as time goes on. And and I'm hopeful that continues, like you say, knock on wood. Right?
Yeah. But it's nice that the work I've unloaded to my associate, right? Now I have this extra time. I'm busy still, but the extra time to grow it, to do consultations, with new clients, and that's busy. I mean, everybody wants to invest in the US right now. So, but it's nice. If I didn't have the associate, I wouldn't be able to do those because I'd be busy doing the work. And, so it's
100%.
One helps the other.
At this stage, do you view growing with more associates a priority, or do you view sort of maintaining your current book and where you're at a priority?
I'm not sure. I don't know if I have a priority, but I just hired another, and it's going to be an assistant, going to help me on the corporate side, and I was looking at another associate. It's just hard in where I'm at. I can't just go find any lawyer. I have to find a lawyer, a U.S. lawyer, right? That someone that's licensed in one of the states and that wants to live in Canada. I mean, so that's why initially I never thought I'd be able to find an associate. And lo and behold, I found Jack. He's my associate, and lives here. He wants to stay here. He licensed in Michigan, and so that's just the, the findings, the pool. My pool is almost non-existent, right? So I would like to, I think, find another associate in the next couple of years, because I think there's more opportunity, and I think it's just going to continue. Yeah. No,
I think that's great. And obviously, if we have anybody listening that happens to live in Canada with a U.S. law license, you might want to reach out to Mike. We could try to get. Believe it or not, I have found associates from just the content I put out because they see like, oh, this guy seems like he's not terrible to work for.
Yeah.
And hey, if we're looking for somebody, so that could sometimes be helpful. I think the one other question, and if there's anything else that I'm missing, you'll have to let me know. But the question I like to sort of end with is something that I think about at this stage in my career, even though I have a lot of time left. For context, I have 4 kids that I've got to somehow help through college. So I'm not going anywhere anytime soon.
Especially not with the cost of U.S. schools.
No, right. Unless I send them to Canada, maybe, right? Yeah, or somewhere else. Yeah. That might be an option with 4 of them. How do you think about, in a small firm, obviously you could save money, that's one way to think about retirement, but what do you think about, do you think about building up to some kind of an exit plan, or do you think about riding into the sunset, still practicing law? How do you think about, as you get onto the other side of the career, what it looks like potentially from a retirement perspective?
Yeah, I like this question. So I've thought about this quite a bit. First of all, I love what I do. I really do enjoy it. more so than even 15 years ago when I was working for other people. And so I really enjoy it. I don't see retirement. What's that? I'll say this. I'll quote. I don't know if you listen. I listen to Calvin Cowherd, right? The Herd on his podcast, and he says this a number of times. He talks about, because people talk about athletes retiring, and his famous phrase is always, "What are you going to retire to?" What are you gonna, like? Right. I don't know. I don't see retirement, as I see slowing down. Maybe more consulting, just consulting. But no exit strategy. I don't. I guess continuate. I'd like to, my associate Jack, would love to him to continue what we built. But not really exit. I feel like, it's as long as I got my mind, kind of continue doing it. But again, continue what I've always been doing the last 10 years, 12 years, is the life balance, right? And don't miss out on things. You work hard, don't miss out on things. And so retirement, what's that? You slow down a bit, do your work, travel, whatever. I don't have any crazy hobbies that I want to get into, not a big golfer. I don't mind it, but, yeah.
Exactly. No, I think that's interesting, and it's funny because the more I have clients that will have these exits, because sometimes you'll build up a trademark portfolio and then they sell the company, and you're like, oh man, because there goes the client to some giant conglomerate. But you think to yourself, well, these people are building businesses to sell them. What are we doing?
Right.
But to the point that it provides a steady income and an ability to kind of have hopefully income that lasts a really long time, as long as you have your mind and you're not just selling it and having that one payday that you have to then somehow make work for the next 60 years or however long you've got left. So
and it's not what we do is not all that hard in a sense physically, right? So
sure, you're absolutely right.
We're not, and and I got clients too. My clients they're some they'll build stuff up to sell, but they even tell me, they're like, I'm not going to retire. I'm just going to do something else. I'm going to start another business, and, they say the same thing. What am I going to retire to? What am I, sit around, golf every day. And that just, it's, even they say it sounds boring,
Right.
So.
Oh yeah. I mean, I know a few people that retired early and they're even, they come to me all the time. Well, I'm thinking about doing this business or this. This is like kind of boring. I don't really have anything to do all day. And I'm always like, well, enjoy your boredom, because I'm definitely not bored right now. But at the same time, I do, you do think about, okay, if I really had nothing to do, it would be, I don't know how that would go. So I appreciate you answering the question. I find it fascinating to ask different lawyers that question, because I think we're in a profession that doesn't lend itself to sort of selling a business, if you will. I mean, you could arguably sell a law practice, but normally the multiples aren't great. Yeah. And it's an interesting sort of thing to think about from, how do you plan as time goes on?
Yeah, I guess it's bringing on associates, right? Eventually partners, right? To, I guess, continue what we've started, and then it's not so much a selling, but it's like, okay, well, I'm going to continue to do this, take a lower salary, but I still take some, income out, because I'm still going to generate income, right? And then, what I like to do is I'd like not to do the admin work. That's my retirement.
Right.
Okay. No admin work. I'm just consulting and advising clients, and no admin. That would be my retirement.
That's not a bad thing. I like that. I might have to go with that myself.
Man.
Well, Mike, thank you so much for your time today. It's really been a pleasure just sort of talking about and hearing about your practice and how you've built it and where you're at today. And we're going to link everything up in the show notes here. But if you are in Canada and need help in the U.S., Mike's your guy. We actually have a lot of lawyers that listen to us in Canada, so they might have clients that have the needs of the type of thing you're talking about. But we'll make sure we put your website and all your profile and information, so if anybody's interested, they can look at it. And
I love it. This was great, Josh. This is what you're doing. This is awesome. The podcast. I was really nervous, but it worked out. So.
Okay. No, but I think it's just a fun conversation. You'd be surprised how much you'd learn just talking to different lawyers about what they're doing and also the similarities. I mean, it's amazing how similar everybody's experience is. We just need to start like a big club because we all have the same, a lot of the same issues come up and a lot of the same, solutions that end up, we figure out eventually. So.
And then I guess to help the younger people, right, that want to start to do this. Because I would have loved, I guess, like that kind of resource, I probably like you, I did it so blind, just like, let's just do it.
Right. That's exactly what happened, right? Completely flying blind. And everyone's like, you can't really start a law firm, can you? You're like 27 years old. I'm like, oh, I think I can.
Give it a shot. Yeah.
Hey everyone, thank you so much for listening or watching the show today. Just a few things before you take off. A reminder that today's podcast was sponsored by Gerben IP. Gerben IP is my trademark law firm. If you are a lawyer who has trademark-related work that you cannot service, we work really well with other lawyers and law firms and offer a referral fee for the lifetime of any client that you might refer to us for trademark-related work. If you have any questions about this, feel free to reach out to me. My email address is jgerben@gerbenlawfirm.com. And finally, wherever you're watching or listening to the show, if you can leave us a rating or review, it helps other people find the podcast or the YouTube show. Please just take the few minutes, click a few buttons, and do that for us. Greatly appreciate it. Thanks again, and I'll talk to you next time.